The morning Sarah Chen kissed her 8-year-old daughter Maya goodbye would be the last time she would see her for 3 years. It started like any other Tuesday in New Geneva, the sky a perfect blue dome over the bustling colony world that had become humanity's crown jewel among the stars. Maya's backpack bounced as she ran toward the school transport, her dark hair catching the artificial sunlight that filtered through the atmospheric processors. Sarah watched from the observation deck of the terraforming station where she worked, a smile playing on her lips as Maya turned to wave one final time before disappearing into the transport. The vehicle lifted smoothly into the morning air, joining the steady stream of traffic that flowed between the residential sectors and the education complex. That was at 0847 local time. At 0851, the Zephyrian ships appeared. They materialized without warning, their sleek black hulls seeming to absorb light rather than reflect it. 16 vessels, each the size of a city block, hanging in the sky like dark omens. The colony's defense grid activated immediately, plasma cannons swiveling toward the unexpected visitors. But before a single shot could be fired, every human-made weapon simply stopped working. The electromagnetic pulse that followed wasn't destructive in the traditional sense. Buildings remained standing. Power continued to flow and life support systems hummed along without interruption. But every piece of military hardware, every defensive satellite, every weapon larger than a handheld pistol became as useful as scrap metal. Sarah pressed her face against the observation window, her breath fogging the reinforced glass as she watched the impossible unfold before her eyes. The school transport carrying Maya had stopped mid-flight, not crashing but simply hovering motionless in the air. Around the colony, hundreds of similar vehicles had been frozen in place, their occupants trapped inside by some incomprehensible technology. The Zephyrian ships moved with fluid grace, extending tendrils of energy that wrapped around each suspended transport like gentle fingers. One by one, they drew the vehicles up into their holds, Sarah's hands pressed flat against the window as she watched her daughter's transport disappear into the belly of the nearest ship. "This is Admiral Kethvar of the Zephyrian Collective," a voice echoed across every communication channel simultaneously. The words came through in perfect human English, though something in the cadence suggested they originated from a very different kind of throat. "We have taken possession of your young ones. They will not be harmed. They will be educated in proper civilization and returned to you when they have learned to reject the violent ways of their species." The colonial governor's response crackled over the emergency broadcast network minutes later, his voice shaking with barely controlled rage. "You have no right to take our children. Return them immediately or face the consequences." A sound that might have been laughter rippled through the alien transmission. Consequences? From a species that wages war on itself? That poisons its own birth world? Your children deserve better than to inherit your legacy of destruction. We will teach them peace, harmony, and the proper order of things. In 20 of your years, we will return them as ambassadors of a better way. The communication ended with a finality that left the entire colony in stunned silence. Sarah's legs gave out and she slumped against the window, her reflection ghost-like in the glass. Around her, other parents were arriving at the terraforming station, drawn by the same desperate hope that the observation deck might offer some glimpse of their children. The Zephyrian ships began to rise, their impossible grace mocking the helplessness of the humans below. Sarah watched until they were nothing more than dark specks against the stars, carrying away everything that mattered in her universe. The first response came from the Colonial Defense Force within hours. Admiral Marcus Webb, a grizzled veteran of the Centauri Wars, appeared on every screen in the colony, his weathered face set in grim determination. "Citizens of New Geneva, we will not accept this violation of our sovereignty. Every ship in the CDF is being recalled to search for these kidnappers. We will find our children and bring them home." But as days turned to weeks, it became clear that the Zephyrians had vanished as completely as if they had never existed. Deep space sensors detected nothing. The most advanced tracking systems in human space found no trace of the alien vessels. It was as if they had simply stepped outside of reality itself, taking 8,000 human children with them. The psychological impact on the colonies was devastating. Parents wandered through empty playgrounds like ghosts, unable to accept that their children were simply gone. Support groups formed, disbanded, and reformed as people struggled to process the magnitude of the loss. Some parents refused to leave their homes, convinced their children would return any moment. Others threw themselves into frantic activity, joining search teams or demanding answers from colonial authorities who had none to give. Sarah found herself falling into the latter category. She requested transfer to Earth, to the heart of human civilization where the real decisions were made. If anyone was going to find the children, it would be the scientists and military leaders of humanity's homeworld. The journey back to Earth took 6 months aboard a commercial transport. Sarah spent most of it staring out at the stars, wondering which one might hide her daughter. She had quit her job at the terraforming station, liquidated her savings, and abandoned everything she had built on New Geneva. None of it mattered without Maya. Earth had changed in the years since Sarah had left for the colonies. The blue marble that had birthed humanity was now encased in orbital platforms and defensive satellites, a fortress world protected by the most advanced military technology the species could devise. But as Sarah's transport approached the planet, she couldn't help but think that all of humanity's weapons and defenses had proven useless against the Zephyrians. The Transport Authority official who processed her arrival was sympathetic but offered little hope. "Ma'am, I understand your loss, but the investigation is being handled by the highest levels of government. Civilian involvement isn't practical at this stage." Sarah's response surprised even herself with its intensity. "Practical? My 8-year-old daughter is somewhere in the galaxy being indoctrinated by aliens who think they know better than her own mother how to raise her." "Don't talk to me about practical." The official's expression softened. "There are support groups in the capital, other parents from the affected colonies. Maybe they can help." Sarah left the spaceport with a single bag and a determination that burned like a cold fire in her chest. She would find Maya, or she would die trying. What she didn't know was that thousands of other parents had made the same decision, and their collective grief was about to reshape the destiny of the human race. The meeting hall in Geneva's government district had been converted from a cultural center, its walls now lined with photos of missing children instead of artwork. Sarah recognized some of the faces from news reports, but seeing them all together created a visual representation of loss that took her breath away. 8,000 children, their smiling faces looking down at the 300 parents who had made the journey to Earth. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood at the front of the room, her silver hair pulled back severely, and her eyes carrying the weight of someone who had been delivering bad news for months. As the head of the Extraterrestrial Contact Division, she had become the unwilling face of humanity's helplessness. "I know you've all traveled far to be here," Dr. Vasquez began, her voice carrying the exhaustion of someone who had repeated these words too many times. "I know you want answers we don't have. The truth is, our best scientific minds have been working around the clock since the abduction, and we are no closer to understanding Zephyrian technology than we were 6 months ago." A man near the front of the room stood up abruptly. Sarah recognized him from the colony news feeds, James Morrison, whose twin boys had been on the same transport as Maya. "No closer? What about the quantum signatures? The energy residue from their ships? Surely something was left behind." Dr. Vasquez's expression didn't change. The energy signatures dissipated within hours, and they don't match any known physics models. "We've consulted with our most advanced theoretical physicists, including teams from the Luna Research Station and the Mars Institute. Their technology appears to operate on principles we don't understand." Sarah felt the familiar surge of frustration that had driven her across the galaxy. She stood, her voice cutting through the murmurs of discontent. "Then we learn, we adapt. We do whatever it takes to understand them well enough to get our children back. Ma'am, with respect, these aren't human technologies we can reverse engineer from wreckage. The Zephyrians left nothing behind except the memory of what they took." Dr. Vasquez's professional composure was beginning to crack. "We don't even know where they went." "But we know they exist," Sarah pressed. "We know they have our children. We know they plan to return in 20 years with those children turned against us. That gives us 20 years to figure out how to stop them." A woman Sarah didn't recognize spoke from the back of the room. "Stop them with what? They disabled our entire defensive grid without firing a shot. They made our ships hover in midair like toys. What could we possibly do against that kind of power?" The question hung in the air, and Sarah realized that this was the heart of humanity's despair. Not just that their children were gone, but that they had been taken by beings so far beyond human capability that resistance seemed impossible. It was then that Dr. Marcus Chen stepped into the room. Sarah recognized him immediately, not just because he was Maya's father, but because his face had been all over the news feeds. The brilliant physicist had been working on theoretical weapon systems when his daughter was taken, and the transformation in his appearance was shocking. The man who had once been Sarah's husband looked like he hadn't slept in months, his clothes wrinkled and his usually neat beard grown wild. "Actually," Marcus said, his voice hoarse but carrying an undercurrent of something that might have been hope. "There might be something we can do." The room fell silent. Dr. Vasquez looked surprised to see him. "Dr. Chen, I wasn't aware you were attending this meeting. Your security clearance doesn't really allow for public discussions of your research." Marcus smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "My security clearance was revoked yesterday. Apparently, my proposals were deemed too extreme for continued government funding." He looked around the room at the faces of the other parents. "They don't want to hear what I've been working on. But I think you might." Sarah felt her heart racing. She and Marcus had divorced 2 years before Maya's birth, their relationship unable to survive the pressures of their careers and their fundamental disagreements about humanity's future among the stars. But seeing him now, she recognized the same desperate determination that had brought her to Earth. "The Zephyrians made one critical mistake," Marcus continued, ignoring Dr. Vasquez's attempts to interrupt. "They revealed themselves. They showed us that there are beings in the galaxy who see humanity as children to be corrected, rather than equals to be respected, and they gave us 20 years to prove them wrong." James Morrison leaned forward in his seat. "What are you talking about? How does knowing they exist help us fight them?" Marcus pulled out a data pad and activated a holographic display that filled the center of the room. The image showed a star map, but not one Sarah recognized. The stars were different colors, arranged in patterns that seemed almost organic. "This is a theoretical model of space-time manipulation based on the energy signatures we detected during the abduction. My team has been working on reverse engineering, not their technology, but the physics principles that make their technology possible." Marcus gestured to the display, and the stars began to move, swirling in complex patterns. "What if I told you that the same forces they use to disable our weapons could be turned into something far more powerful?" Dr. Vasquez stepped forward, her professional demeanor replaced by obvious alarm. "Dr. Chen, you're discussing classified research in a public forum. I'm going to have to ask you to stop." "Classified research that's been canceled," Marcus shot back. "Apparently the government considers my proposals too dangerous to pursue. They'd rather focus on diplomatic solutions and peaceful contact protocols." His voice carried bitter sarcasm. "Because that worked so well the first time." Sarah found herself moving toward the front of the room. "What kind of proposals?" Marcus met her eyes for the first time since entering the room, and she saw in them the same cold fire that had been burning in her own chest for months, the kind that would make the Zephyrians regret teaching humanity that there are things in the universe worth fighting for. The holographic display shifted, showing what looked like a massive construction project in space. The structure was unlike anything Sarah had ever seen. Part space station, part weapon, part something else entirely. It stretched across several astronomical units, its components connected by streams of energy that pulsed like living veins. "The theoretical foundation is solid," Marcus explained, his voice gaining strength as he spoke. "We can't match their technology directly, but we don't need to. We just need to make the cost of keeping our children higher than the cost of returning them." A parent Sarah hadn't met before, a woman with tears streaming down her face, spoke in a whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the room. "You're talking about war. Real war. Against beings who could destroy us without effort." Marcus nodded slowly. "Yes, I'm talking about war. But not the kind of war they'll expect from us. They think humans are predictable, violent in crude and obvious ways. They took our children because they believe we'll exhaust ourselves in futile attacks and eventually accept their judgment." He gestured to the holographic structure, and Sarah realized she was looking at something that could reshape the fundamental nature of reality in the space around it. What they don't understand is that humans don't just fight with weapons. We fight with physics itself. We turn the universe into our weapon. Dr. Vasquez was speaking rapidly into a communication device, probably calling for security, but Sarah found she didn't care. Something in Marcus's words had awakened a possibility she hadn't dared to consider. Not just finding their children, but showing the galaxy what happened when you underestimated humanity. "How long would it take to build?" she asked. Marcus smiled, and this time there was genuine warmth in it. "With government backing and unlimited resources, 8 years. Without government backing, using private funding and volunteer labor from people who have the same motivation we do. He paused, looking around the room at the faces of parents who had lost everything that mattered. 12 years, which still gives us 8 years to hunt down every Zephyrian ship in the galaxy and make them understand that taking human children was the worst mistake their species has ever made. The abandoned mining station in the asteroid belt had been scheduled for demolition when Sarah Chen purchased it, through a maze of shell corporations and private investors. What had once been a modest operation extracting rare metals from the rocky debris between Mars and Jupiter was now the most secret construction project in human history. 3 years had passed since the meeting in Geneva, and the collection of grieving parents had transformed into something the galaxy had never seen before. They called themselves the Reclamation Project, and their membership had grown far beyond the original families. Scientists whose research had been deemed too dangerous, military officers frustrated by bureaucratic restrictions, engineers who dreamed of building impossible things, and ordinary people who simply refused to accept that humanity's children were gone forever. Sarah floated through the central hub of the station, her magnetic boots clicking against the metal decking as she reviewed progress reports on her datapad. The transformation was remarkable. Where once there had been simple mining equipment, now there were fabrication bays capable of manipulating matter at the quantum level. Where ore processors had once separated valuable minerals from worthless rock, now there were theoretical physics laboratories that were rewriting the laws of the universe. The field generators are online, reported Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the Japanese physicist who had joined the project after her own government had dismissed her theories about space-time manipulation. We're seeing stable distortion patterns across a sphere of influence measuring approximately 50,000 kilometers in diameter. Sarah pulled herself over to the observation window that looked out at their creation. The sight still took her breath away, even after watching it grow day by day for 3 years. The erasure engine, as Marcus had named it, didn't look like any weapon humanity had ever built. It was a delicate lattice of crystalline structures and energy conduits that stretched across space like a vast spider web. At its center, barely visible to the naked eye, space itself seemed to bend and twist in ways that hurt to look at directly. "Any word from the deep space reconnaissance teams?" Sarah asked. Dr. Tanaka's expression grew serious. Team 7 reports contact with a Zephyrian patrol in the Vega system. They're maintaining surveillance from long range, but the alien ships are definitely scanning human colonies. It looks like they're checking on their handiwork. Sarah felt the familiar cold anger settle in her stomach. The Zephyrians had not been idle during the past 3 years. Long-range sensors had detected their ships at the edges of human space, watching and waiting. Intercepted communications suggested they were monitoring human society for signs of the violence and chaos they expected their intervention to prevent. What they found instead must have puzzled them. Crime rates in human space had dropped to historical lows. Wars between human factions had essentially ceased. The species that the Zephyrians had judged as irredeemably violent was demonstrating unprecedented cooperation and peaceful behavior. Of course, the Zephyrians didn't know that every parent in human space was channeling their rage into a single project, and that project was nearing completion. Marcus Chen emerged from the central laboratory, his appearance even more haggard than it had been in Geneva, but his eyes burning with the intensity of someone who had found purpose. "The targeting system is calibrated. We can lock onto any star within a radius of 500 light-years and maintain targeting precision down to the atomic level." "And the power requirements?" Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer would be staggering. "Everything. Every reactor in human space will need to be linked to the grid. Every solar collector, every fusion plant, every antimatter generator. For approximately 18 hours, human civilization will be running on backup power and emergency systems." Marcus smiled grimly. "The good news is that 18 hours should be more than sufficient." Sarah looked back out at the erasure engine, trying to comprehend the magnitude of what they had built. The device didn't destroy things in any conventional sense. Instead, it reached across interstellar distances and convinced the universe that its target had never existed in the first place. The star would not explode or collapse. It would simply cease to be, along with everything in its system, as if the fundamental forces that held it together had suddenly forgotten how to function. The ethics committee has been asking for another meeting, Dr. Tanaka mentioned quietly. Dr. Reeves is concerned about the implications of our technology. Sarah's laugh contained no humor. Dr. Reeves can discuss ethics with my daughter when she gets back. Until then, the ethics are simple. They took our children, so we take their star. The ethics committee was one of the few concessions the Reclamation Project had made to conventional human morality. Composed of philosophers, religious leaders, and political theorists, they had spent 3 years debating the moral implications of developing a weapon that could erase entire solar systems from existence. Their conclusion, reached just weeks earlier, had been as divided as expected. The majority opinion held that the use of such a weapon could never be justified, regardless of provocation. The minority opinion argued that the protection of humanity's children outweighed any other consideration. The deciding vote had come from Dr. Sarah Okafor, a philosopher of ethics whose own grandson had been among the taken children. Her final statement had been simple. If we do not use this weapon, we prove to the galaxy that human children have no value. If we do use it, we prove that they have infinite value. I know which universe I want my grandson to grow up in. A communication alert interrupted Sarah's thoughts. The main display screen activated, showing the face of Captain Lisa Rodriguez, commanding the reconnaissance vessel Shadow Dancer in the Outer Rim territories. Project Control. This is Rodriguez reporting from the Kepler system. We've got movement from our friends. 3 Zephyrian ships just jumped in system and are heading toward Kepler 442b. It looks like they're beginning another collection run. Sarah felt ice form in her veins. Kepler 442b was home to New Tasmania, a colony of 40,000 humans, including nearly 3,000 children. If the Zephyrians were planning another abduction, it would be the first since the initial incident 3 years ago. How long until they reach the colony? Sarah asked. Approximately 6 hours at their current speed, Rodriguez replied. The Colonial Defense Force is moving to intercept, but based on what happened at New Geneva, they'll be useless, Sarah finished. She looked at Marcus, who was already moving toward the control center. Is the engine ready for live fire? Marcus nodded, his fingers dancing over holographic controls. We'll need 2 hours to bring the targeting system online and another hour to charge the field generators. The Kepler system is well within our range. Sarah made the decision that would define the next chapter of human history without hesitation. Do it. Send a message to all stations. Operation Reclamation is now active. Begin power transfer protocols and prepare for full weapon deployment. Throughout the asteroid belt, automated systems began the process of linking every human power source into a single grid. On Earth, on Mars, on the mining stations of the Outer Rim, fusion reactors were redirected and solar collectors realigned. The parents who had spent 3 years building the impossible were about to use it. Dr. Chen, Sarah called as Marcus supervised the weapon's activation sequence. When we fire this thing, how long before they feel it? Marcus paused in his work, considering the question. The effect propagates at the speed of light, so approximately 8 hours for the gravitational effects to reach the inner planets of the Kepler system. But Sarah, you need to understand something about what we're about to do. She waited for him to continue. When the Kepler star ceases to exist, it won't just kill the Zephyrians currently in that system. It will send a message to every advanced civilization in the galaxy that humanity is willing to commit genocide against an entire star system to protect its young. We'll be announcing ourselves as the most dangerous species in known space. Sarah looked out at the stars, thinking about Maya somewhere among them, being taught that her own species was too violent to be trusted with its own children. Good, she said simply. Let them know what happens when you take something that belongs to humanity. The first indication that something had gone wrong came from the Deep Space Monitoring Station at Proxima Centauri. Dr. Jennifer Walsh was analyzing routine gravitational wave data when her instruments began registering readings that should have been impossible. The star designated Kepler 442, located approximately 1/200 light-years from Earth, had simply vanished from the universe. Not collapsed into a black hole. Not exploded in a supernova. Vanished. The gravitational waves that should have been emanating from a star system containing 4 planets and approximately 2 solar masses of matter had simply stopped, as if someone had reached into the cosmos and deleted 8 billion years of stellar evolution with the precision of removing a line of text from a document. Sarah Chen received the confirmation 18 hours after the erasure engine had fired. She was in the observation deck of the mining station, watching technicians shut down the massive weapon that had consumed the power output of human civilization for nearly a day. The device was already beginning to fold in on itself, its crystalline structures retracting and its energy conduits going dark. They had built it for a single purpose, and that purpose had been fulfilled. It worked, Marcus said simply, joining her at the observation window. His voice carried exhaustion and something that might have been awe. The Kepler system no longer exists. The star, the planets, the Zephyrian ships, all of it. Gone. Sarah nodded, feeling strangely empty despite the magnitude of their achievement. And New Tasmania? Safe. The Zephyrian ships were still 3 hours out from the colony when the star disappeared. The gravitational effects hit them first. By the time light from the dying system reached New Tasmania, the threat was already eliminated. She should have felt satisfaction, Sarah thought. They had done the impossible. They had built a weapon that could reach across interstellar distances and eliminate an entire solar system. They had saved human children from abduction and sent a message to the galaxy that humanity would not be trifled with. Instead, she felt hollow. How many? She asked quietly. Marcus understood the question immediately. The Kepler system was uninhabited except for the Zephyrian ships. No permanent colonies, no research stations. But the ships. He paused, consulting his datapad. Intelligence estimates suggest each ship carried a crew of approximately 300. 3 ships, so roughly 900 individuals. 900 beings who had awakened that morning in what they believed was a stable, predictable universe, and who had ceased to exist along with the very atoms that comprised their bodies. Sarah tried to feel remorse and found she couldn't. They had taken Maya. They had taken 8,000 human children and disappeared into the void, convinced of their moral superiority. The 900 Zephyrians in the Kepler system had died for the crimes of their species. The communication alert that sounded 3 days later changed everything. Sarah was reviewing supply requests for the weapon dismantling operation when the main display activated, showing the face of Admiral Marcus Webb, the Colonial Defense Force, officer who had promised to find the missing children 3 years ago. His expression was grim, but there was something else there, something that might have been hope. Project Control, this is Admiral Webb, broadcasting from CDF headquarters on Luna. We've received a communication from the Zephyrian Collective. They want to talk. Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. What kind of communication? A formal diplomatic request for immediate negotiations. They're claiming they want to discuss the return of the abducted children in exchange for a cessation of hostilities. Webb's expression grew more serious. Sarah, they're scared. The message came through on every communication frequency simultaneously, broadcast from at least 12 different locations. They're not taking any chances that we might miss their surrender. The word hung in the air like a physical presence. Surrender. The beings who had taken human children because they viewed humanity as too violent to be trusted were now begging for mercy. What are their terms? Sarah asked. They want to meet in neutral space, the Vega system. They're offering to return all abducted children immediately and provide compensation for the trauma caused to both the children and their families. In exchange, they want guarantees that humanity will not use what they're calling stellar erasure technology against any other Zephyrian systems. Marcus had appeared beside Sarah during the conversation, and she saw her own mixed emotions reflected in his face. Victory, but at a cost that was only beginning to be understood. There's more, Admiral Webb continued. The communication included detailed star charts showing the location of every Zephyrian colony and outpost in the galaxy. They're offering complete transparency about their civilization's extent and capabilities. They want us to know exactly how many of them we could kill if we chose to. Sarah closed her eyes, trying to process the magnitude of what they had accomplished. 3 years ago, they had been helpless parents watching their children disappear into the void. Now, an entire galactic civilization was offering unconditional surrender, rather than face the possibility of having their stars deleted from existence. Set up the meeting, she said finally. But not in the Vega system. They can come to us. Sol system, Earth orbit. If they want to return our children, They can do it where every human in the galaxy can witness their capitulation. Admiral Webb nodded. I'll relay your terms. Sarah, there's one more thing. The Intelligence Division has been analyzing the gravitational effects of the Kepler erasure. The energy signature was detectable from over 2,000 light-years away. Every advanced civilization in this part of the galaxy knows what we did. Good, Sarah replied. Let them all know that human children are not to be touched. The week that followed was a strange time of preparation and reflection. The reclamation project had achieved its goal, but the implications of their success were still being understood. Xenobiologists were scrambling to analyze the limited data available about Zephyrian physiology and psychology. Diplomats were preparing for humanity's first formal contact with an alien species, under circumstances that no one had anticipated. Most importantly, families were preparing to be reunited with children who had been gone for 3 years. Sarah found herself unsure how to feel about seeing Maya again. Her daughter had been 8 when she was taken. She would be 11 now. 3 years was a significant portion of a child's life, and there was no way to know how Zephyrian education and indoctrination might have changed her. The day before the scheduled meeting, Sarah received a personal message from Dr. Elena Vasquez, the head of the Extraterrestrial Contact Division, who had once told the parents that there was nothing to be done. Sarah, I owe you an apology. When you and the other parents came to me 3 years ago, I thought you were driven by grief and false hope. I never imagined that a group of civilians could accomplish what our best military and scientific minds considered impossible. You've changed the balance of power in the galaxy, and you've brought our children home. History will remember what you did. Sarah deleted the message without responding. History would remember, but she wasn't sure how. They had saved their children by demonstrating humanity's willingness to commit acts of destruction that bordered on cosmic horror. They had gained the respect of the galaxy by proving they were more dangerous than anyone had imagined. The Zephyrian ships arrived exactly on schedule, emerging from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, with an escort of human vessels surrounding them. The aliens had kept their word about transparency, broadcasting their approach vector and ship specifications in advance. They were taking no chances on being perceived as a threat. As Sarah watched the alien vessels approach Earth, she thought about the choice they had made 3 years ago. They could have accepted the loss of their children, trusted in diplomacy and patience. Instead, they had chosen to build a weapon that could erase stars and used it to terrorize an entire galactic civilization into submission. Maya was coming home, along with 8,000 other human children. The Zephyrians would never again presume to judge humanity's fitness as parents or guardians. But in saving their children, the parents of the Reclamation Project had revealed something about humanity that could never be taken back. They were the species that would burn down the galaxy to protect their young. And now everyone knew it. The Zephyrian ship that entered Earth's orbit was unlike anything in human experience, its organic curves and bioluminescent markings suggesting a technology that had grown rather than been built. Sarah Chen watched from the observation deck of Luna Station as the vessel positioned itself precisely where human traffic control had directed, its movements careful and submissive. Maya was somewhere inside that ship, along with nearly 3,000 other children from the outer colonies. The remaining 5,000 were aboard similar vessels approaching Mars, Europa, and the other major population centers of the Sol system. The Zephyrians were returning every stolen child simultaneously, their surrender as complete as their original victory had been overwhelming. The Zephyrian delegation is requesting permission to beam directly to the negotiation chamber, reported Commander Torres, the Luna Station officer coordinating the historic meeting. They say their representative is prepared to formally apologize and discuss reparations. Sarah nodded, though part of her was more interested in the technical capabilities the aliens were revealing than in their diplomatic overtures. Transporters that could move living beings across space without requiring physical ships were yet another example of technology that humanity had never even theorized. The negotiation chamber had been hastily converted from a cargo bay, its walls lined with translation equipment and recording devices that would preserve every word of humanity's first formal diplomatic contact with an alien species. Sarah took her place at the human delegation table, flanked by Admiral Webb, Dr. Vasquez, and Marcus, who had been granted security clearance for this meeting despite his unofficial status. The Zephyrian representative materialized in a column of golden light, and Sarah got her first clear look at the beings who had taken her daughter. The alien was tall and elegant, its elongated limbs and translucent skin giving it an ethereal quality that was both beautiful and unsettling. When it spoke, the words came through the translation system in perfect human English, but there was an underlying harmonic quality that suggested complex vocal structures. "I am Kethvar, first speaker of the Zephyrian collective," the alien began, its large eyes reflecting the chamber's lighting in patterns that might have been emotional displays. "I come before you not as a conqueror or judge, but as a being who has witnessed the terrible consequences of hubris and misunderstanding." Admiral Webb leaned forward in his chair. "You took our children. 3 years of their lives, 3 years of development and growth with their families. Stolen because you decided humanity wasn't fit to raise its own young. What possible justification could there be for such an act?" Kethavar's skin patterns shifted to darker hues, and when it responded, there was something in its voice that the translation system rendered as profound sadness. "We believed we were saving them. Our observations of human civilization showed endless cycles of violence, warfare, and environmental destruction. We thought your children deserved better than to inherit such a legacy. And now," Sarah asked, her voice deadly quiet, "now we understand that we were observing only the surface of your species. We saw the violence but missed the love that drives it. We saw the destruction but missed the protection it represents." Kethvar's eyes focused directly on Sarah. "When you erased the Kepler star to protect a single colony of your people, we realized that we had made a fundamental error in our assessment of humanity." Marcus spoke for the first time since entering the chamber. "What exactly did you teach our children during the 3 years you held them?" The alien's skin patterns grew even darker, cycling through colors that the translation system couldn't interpret. "We taught them our philosophy of peaceful coexistence, our scientific knowledge, our understanding of the galaxy and its many civilizations. We believed we were preparing them to return to your society as ambassadors of a better way." "And when they return?" Dr. Vasquez asked. "What condition will they be in?" "Physically, they are unharmed. We have ensured they received proper nutrition, medical care, and physical development. Mentally," Kethvar paused, its patterns shifting to what might have been uncertainty, "they have been exposed to concepts and knowledge that may seem strange to human understanding. They have learned about the galaxy beyond your borders, about civilizations that span star systems and technologies that reshape reality itself." Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's temperature control. "Are they still human? Have you changed them somehow?" "They remain genetically and physiologically human," Kethvar assured her. "But their perspective has been expanded. They understand now that humanity is not alone in the galaxy, and they have seen what other species consider normal behavior. Some may find it difficult to readjust to purely human society." The implication hung in the air like a toxic cloud. The Zephyrians hadn't just taken their children. They had fundamentally altered their understanding of the universe and humanity's place in it. Maya would return to her. But would she still be the 8-year-old girl who had waved goodbye from the school transport? "We offer reparations," Kethvar continued, gesturing with one elongated arm toward a device that materialized on the table between them. "Technology, resources, knowledge. We can provide you with faster-than-light communication systems, medical techniques that can extend human lifespan by centuries, energy sources that could power your entire civilization for millennia." Admiral Webb examined the device with obvious interest, but Sarah found herself unimpressed by the offer. "You think you can balance 3 years of stolen childhood with technology? You think our children are commodities to be traded for?" "No," Kethvar said immediately, its skin patterns shifting to bright alarmed colors. "We think our crime cannot be balanced by anything we might offer. The reparations are not payment for forgiveness, but recognition of the debt we can never fully repay." Sarah looked around the table at her fellow negotiators. Admiral Webb was focused on the strategic implications of advanced alien technology. Dr. Vasquez was taking notes frantically, documenting every word for the historical record. Marcus was watching the alien with the calculating gaze of someone trying to understand a complex equation. "There will be conditions," Sarah said finally. Complete star charts showing every Zephyrian settlement and outpost. Regular communication to ensure no other human children are ever taken. Most importantly, an oath sworn by your entire collective that humanity will be left alone to develop as we choose. Agreed, Kethvar responded without hesitation. Additionally, we will share our knowledge of other galactic civilizations that might pose threats to human expansion. Consider it a warning system to prevent future conflicts. The formal negotiations continued for hours, covering everything from trade agreements to territorial boundaries. But Sarah's attention was focused on the growing certainty that Maya was about to return to her fundamentally changed. 3 years in the care of beings who viewed human civilization as primitive and violent would have left marks that no amount of alien technology could erase. When the talks finally concluded, Kethvar made one final statement that would haunt Sarah for years to come. Your children will return to you with knowledge of the galaxy and its wonders. They have seen cities that span entire moons, technologies that can reshape matter at the atomic level, civilizations that have existed for millions of years. They know now that humanity is young and small by galactic standards. The alien paused, its skin patterns cycling through complex sequences. But they also know that humanity is the only species in the galaxy willing to erase stars to protect its young. They understand what that means, and they are proud of it. Your children return to you not as converts to our philosophy, but as witnesses to your terrible love. As the Zephyrian representative disappeared in another column of golden light, Sarah realized that the hardest part of their journey was just beginning. They had brought their children home, but those children had been changed by their experience in ways that might never be fully understood. Maya was coming home, but she was returning to a universe where her mother had committed genocide to save her. The little girl who had waved goodbye 3 years ago would have to reconcile that knowledge with her memories of bedtime stories and birthday parties. Humanity had won its first galactic conflict through superior firepower and willingness to use it. But the cost of victory was measured not just in erased stars, but in the innocence that could never be returned to the children they had fought so hard to save. Maya Chen stepped off the transport ship at Luna Station with the measured grace of someone much older than her 11 years. Sarah watched her daughter approach through the observation window, searching desperately for signs of the little girl who had bounded toward the school transport 3 years earlier. What she saw instead was a child who moved with careful precision, whose eyes held knowledge that no human child should possess. The reunion chamber had been designed to ease the psychological transition for the returning children. Soft lighting, comfortable furniture, and familiar human foods were arranged to create an environment as different from alien technology as possible. But when Maya entered the room, her first action was to examine the walls with the analytical gaze of someone assessing structural integrity. "Hello, Mother," Maya said, and even those simple words carried an accent that hadn't been there before. Not alien exactly, but formal in a way that spoke of careful education and precise communication. "I have missed you." Sarah knelt down to embrace her daughter, and Maya allowed herself to be held, but there was a stiffness to her posture that broke Sarah's heart. The spontaneous affection of childhood had been replaced by something more controlled, more considered. "I missed you too, sweetheart," Sarah whispered, fighting back tears. "Every day. Are you all right? Did they hurt you?" Maya pulled back slightly, studying her mother's face with those 2 knowing eyes. "They did not cause me physical harm. Their educational methods were comprehensive and enlightening. I learned much about the galaxy and its inhabitants. The clinical language was perhaps the most painful part. Maya spoke like a diplomat delivering a briefing rather than a child reuniting with her parent." Sarah looked around the reunion chamber, seeing similar scenes playing out between other families. Some children clung to their parents with desperate familiarity, but others maintained the same careful distance that Maya displayed. "Maya, do you remember our apartment on New Geneva? Your room with the star charts on the ceiling?" A flicker of something warmer crossed Maya's features. "I remember. You said the stars were doorways to adventure." She paused, considering her words carefully. "Now I know what lies beyond those doorways. The galaxy is vast and ancient, Mother. Humanity occupies such a small portion of it." Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's temperature. "What did they tell you about what happened while you were gone?" Maya's expression became even more serious, if that were possible. "They informed us about the Kepler incident. They explained that you built a weapon capable of stellar erasure, and used it to secure our return. She looked directly into Sarah's eyes. They told us that humanity proved itself to be more dangerous than any species they had previously encountered. And what do you think about that? For the first time since entering the room, Maya smiled, and Sarah caught a glimpse of her daughter beneath the careful composure. I think they underestimated how much human parents love their children. They calculated the probable responses to their intervention, and never considered that you would rebuild the fundamental laws of physics to get us back. Sarah found herself laughing despite the circumstances. Rebuild physics? Is that what they called it? The erasure engine operates by manipulating quantum field fluctuations to convince the universe that matter never achieved stable existence in the first place, Maya explained matter-of-factly. It's actually quite elegant, though the power requirements are staggering. The Zephyrians were impressed despite themselves. Sarah stared at her daughter, trying to process the fact that an 11-year-old was casually discussing technologies that the most advanced human scientists barely understood. Maya, how much do you know about what we built? Everything, Maya replied simply. The Zephyrians made sure we understood the full implications of your response to our abduction. They wanted us to comprehend exactly what humanity was willing to do for its young. The reunion continued for hours, with Maya patiently answering questions about her experiences while demonstrating knowledge that would have impressed university professors. She spoke of Zephyrian cities that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, of educational systems that implanted knowledge directly into developing minds, of galactic civilizations that measured their histories in geological ages. But it was only when Sarah mentioned bedtime stories that Maya's careful composure finally cracked. I remember the story about the princess who lived in a star, Maya said, her voice suddenly small and vulnerable. She could travel anywhere in the galaxy, but she always came home because that's where people loved her. Tears began to flow down her cheeks. I wanted to come home, Mother. Every day I wanted to come home. Sarah pulled her daughter close, and this time Maya melted into the embrace like the child she still was beneath all the imposed knowledge and careful education. You are home, Sarah whispered. You're home and safe and loved, and nothing is ever going to take you away again. But even as she held her daughter, Sarah could feel the weight of everything that had changed. Maya was home, but she carried within her mind the accumulated knowledge of a galactic civilization. She understood technologies that humanity was centuries away from developing. She knew the true scope of the galaxy and humanity's tiny place within it. The psychological evaluations that followed painted a complex picture. The returned children were physically healthy and intellectually advanced far beyond their years, but they struggled with reintegration into human society. They had been taught to think on galactic scales, to consider the implications of actions across centuries of development. Playground games seemed trivial when you understood the mathematical principles governing stellar formation. Dr. Amanda Price, the child psychologist assigned to Maya's case, summarized the challenge in stark terms. These children have been given an adult's understanding of the universe while retaining a child's emotional development. They know more about physics and galactic politics than most university graduates, but they still need help tying their shoes. The cultural impact extended far beyond the returning children. News of humanity's first contact with alien life and the circumstances surrounding it spread throughout human space like wildfire. The fact that a group of civilian parents had accomplished what the combined military and scientific establishments had deemed impossible became a source of both pride and unease. Religious leaders struggled to incorporate the reality of galactic civilizations into their theological frameworks. Scientists scrambled to understand the implications of technologies that operated on principles their physics couldn't explain. Political leaders faced the challenge of governing a species that had suddenly become aware of its place in a much larger universe. Maya adapted to her return with the same careful precision she applied to everything else. She attended regular school but found herself bored by lessons that covered material she had mastered years ago. She made friends, but struggled to relate to children who had never seen the galaxy beyond Earth's atmosphere. She loved her mother fiercely, but sometimes looked at human civilization with the analytical detachment of an outside observer. 6 months after the reunion, Sarah found Maya in her room, working on what appeared to be a three-dimensional mathematical model that hung in the air above her desk like a hologram. "What are you building?" Sarah asked. Maya looked up from her work with excitement that reminded Sarah powerfully of the 8-year-old who had once built elaborate castles from building blocks. It's a communication array. If I can solve the quantum entanglement equations, we could talk to anyone in the galaxy instantly, regardless of distance. Sarah sat down on the bed, watching her daughter manipulate complex mathematical structures with casual ease. Do you want to talk to the Zephyrians? Sometimes, Maya admitted. They taught me so much and I miss learning new things at that pace. But mostly I want to talk to the other children, the ones who were taken from different colonies. She paused in her work. We're probably the only humans who understand what's really out there. It's lonely sometimes. Sarah felt the familiar weight of guilt and pride that had become constant companions since Maya's return. They had saved their children, but in doing so they had changed them irrevocably. The little girl who had once been content with bedtime stories now carried the knowledge of entire civilizations in her mind. Maya, Sarah said carefully, do you ever wish things had been different? That you had never been taken? Maya considered the question with the same careful thought she applied to everything else. I wish I could have learned all of this without being separated from you, she said finally. But I'm glad I know about the galaxy. I'm glad I understand what humanity accomplished to bring us home. She looked directly at her mother. I'm proud that you erased a star for me. Even if the Zephyrians think it was terrifying, I think it was beautiful. Sarah smiled, recognizing in that moment both the daughter she had lost and the young woman Maya was becoming. The children had returned changed, carrying knowledge that would reshape humanity's understanding of its place in the galaxy. But they were still human, still loved, still the same precious lives that had been worth any price to recover. The galaxy now knew that humanity would burn down stars to protect its young. But perhaps more importantly, humanity's children knew they were loved enough to be worth such sacrifice. 20 years had passed since the Kepler incident, and Maya Chen now stood before the Galactic Council as humanity's youngest ever representative. At 31, she possessed not only the advanced education the Zephyrians had provided, but also 2 decades of human experience processing that knowledge. The child who had once been taken as a symbol of humanity's violent nature now served as proof of its capacity for growth and wisdom. The council chamber was a marvel of engineering that spanned dimensions, its crystalline walls allowing representatives from dozens of species to interact, despite radically different atmospheric and gravitational requirements. Maya moved through this impossible space with the easy confidence of someone who had spent her youth learning to think beyond the limitations of single-planet existence. The human delegation wishes to propose a formal amendment to the Galactic Protection Protocols, Maya announced, her voice carrying clearly through the translation matrices that rendered her words comprehensible to beings whose communication methods ranged from harmonic resonance to controlled electromagnetic pulses. The Zephyrian representative, now identified as Speaker Veltar, rather than the Kethvar who had negotiated their surrender decades earlier, responded with the complex skin patterns that their species used to convey emotional undertones. The collective is prepared to hear humanity's proposal. Though we confess curiosity about its nature, Maya smiled, an expression that had learned to convey both warmth and the subtle threat that came with being the child of the species that had made the galaxy's first stellar erasure. We propose that the abduction of children from any species, for any reason, be classified as an act of war justifying immediate and unlimited retaliation. The chamber fell silent except for the ambient harmonics of the translation systems. Representatives from species spanning the galaxy processed the implications of what the human had just suggested. The Altarians, who measured their thoughts in geological timescales, took nearly an hour to formulate their response. The quantum collective, existing in multiple probability states simultaneously, provided 17 different answers depending on the universe being considered. It was the hegemony representative who finally voiced what many were thinking. You would formalize the principle that took an entire star system from existence? You would make such destruction legal under galactic law? We would make it clear that some things are sacred, Maya replied. The Zephyrians took human children because they believed they knew better than human parents how those children should be raised. They made a fundamental error in judgment about what humans would sacrifice to protect their young. She gestured to the holographic display that appeared in the center of the chamber, showing a real-time map of human space. Where once there had been a handful of colony worlds scattered across a few dozen light years, Now there were thousands of settlements spanning hundreds of systems. Humanity had not been idle in the 2 decades since first contact. The lesson learned from the Kepler incident wasn't that humans are uniquely violent, Maya continued. It was that humans are uniquely protective. We don't wage war for territory or resources or political advantage. We wage war for each other. Every human colony in the galaxy exists under the protection of weapons that can erase stars. And every species in this chamber knows that those weapons will be used if our children are threatened. The truth of her statement was evident in the reactions of the assembled representatives. Some species had attempted to test humanity's resolve over the years, probing the edges of human space or making veiled threats against human colonies. Each had learned the same lesson the Zephyrians had discovered. Humans meant what they said when it came to protecting their own. The Crystalline Empire had learned this lesson when they attempted to claim mining rights to a system containing a human research station. The research station had housed 17 families, including 43 children. The Empire's fleet had been warned once to withdraw. When they ignored the warning, 3 of their star systems had simply ceased to exist. The Empire now served as humanity's most cooperative trading partner. The proposed amendment would prevent future misunderstandings, Maya explained. Rather than allowing species to discover humanity's response through experience, we would make our position clear in galactic law. Children are inviolate. Families are sacred. Anyone who interferes with either should expect consequences measured in stellar masses. Speaker Veltar's skin patterns shifted to what experienced xenobiologists had learned to recognize as deep contemplation mixed with lingering fear. The collective supports this proposal. Our historical error in judgment regarding human children has been instructive. We believe all species would benefit from clarity on this matter. The debate that followed lasted for days, with representatives arguing the philosophical and practical implications of formalizing humanity's protective doctrine into galactic law. Some species worried about the precedent of making stellar destruction a legal response to any crime. Others pointed out that the precedent already existed, and that humanity had demonstrated remarkable restraint in its application. The final vote was unanimous, though Maya suspected that unanimity had more to do with fear than conviction. The Galactic Protection Protocols now included Article 7, the deliberate separation of offspring from their birth species, without consent of both offspring and parental units, shall be considered an act of war justifying any level of response deemed necessary by the affected species. As the council session concluded, Maya found herself approached by delegates from dozens of species, all curious about the human who spoke with such casual authority about erasing stars. She answered their questions with the patience she had learned from her mother and the comprehensive knowledge she had gained from her Zephyrian education. "Do you ever regret what your parents did?" asked the representative from the Peaceful Concord, a species that had achieved galactic status through their commitment to nonviolence. Maya considered the question with the careful thought that had become second nature to all the returned children. "I regret that it was necessary. I regret that the Zephyrians made assumptions about humanity, without understanding what those assumptions would cost. But I don't regret that my mother loved me enough to remake physics rather than accept my loss." Later, as Maya prepared to return to Earth, she reflected on how much had changed since that morning, when an 8-year-old girl had waved goodbye to her mother. Humanity had joined the galactic community, not as junior partners learning from their betters, but as the species that had introduced a new and terrifying concept to galactic politics: parental love backed by stellar engineering. The children who had been taken as symbols of humanity's violence had grown up to become bridges between human and alien civilization. They served as ambassadors, scientists, and philosophers, their unique perspective allowing them to translate human concepts for alien minds and alien knowledge for human understanding. But perhaps most importantly, they served as living reminders of what happened when someone threatened a human child. Maya's ship lifted off from the council station, carrying her back toward the small blue world that had spawned the galaxy's most protective species. As Earth grew larger in the view screen, she thought about her own children, born into a universe where no alien species would ever dare to question whether human parents knew best how to raise their young. The galaxy had learned to respect humanity not for its wisdom or technology or cultural achievements, but for the simple, terrible fact that humans would burn down stars to protect their children. It was a lesson written in the empty space where Kepler 442 had once shone, and it was a lesson that would never be forgotten. Maya smiled as Earth filled the view screen, thinking about the bedtime stories she would tell her own children that night. Stories about brave parents who loved their children so much, they convinced the universe itself to help bring them home. Stories about a species that had earned its place among the stars not through conquest or diplomacy, but through the simple act of refusing to abandon their young. The galaxy was vast and ancient and full of wonders beyond human imagination, but it belonged in a very real sense to the species that loved its children enough to erase stars for them, and everyone knew it.